No scholars can tell where the orcs originated from, but all agree that they date back to the age before ages, and though many orcs will claim that Rovagok is their creator, he knew nothing of them until the Age of Darkness. Earliest writings speak of orcs as a subterranean race living in the Darklands upper region, also called Nadaroth. Closer to animal than humanoid, the orcs of the time fought daily to survive in the harsh environment they called home, and battle not only among themselves, but also any other race that threatened their survival. Dwarves were the biggest threat to the orcs, and their clashes were frequent. The more advanced and intelligent race of dwarves inadvertently taught the orcs about warfare tools and weaponry through the centuries of battle, as the orcs saw the effectiveness of the dwarves and their weapons. The orcs would collect weapons and tools from the fallen dwarves and try to make their own. And though the result were cruder weapons and tools, they were still very effective. When the Earthfall came, it caused great parts of Nadaroth to collapse, convincing the dwarves that it was a sign from their god Torak to begin what is known as the Quest for Sky. The merciless dwarves drove the orcs ahead of them as they ventured towards the surface, forcing the orc tribes to leave their homes. After decades of battling while fleeing from the dwarves, the orcs finally emerged onto the surface of Golarion. What they found was a vast, cold, and lifeless place, for this was during the Age of Darkness, and the sun was blocked out by ash and dust from the fall of the Starstone. This new home was all but undefended, and the orcs saw that just as they had been unable to defend their homes from the dwarves, the surface dwellers could not defend their homes from the orcs. And so began the sacking, a time where orcs stormed across the surface world, slaughtering, crushing, and enslaving humans and other survivors of the Earthfall. They built new barbaric kingdoms on ruins of ancient cities and ruled what they claimed for decades. Some intelligent orcs started to experiment with the basics of magic and came to understand writing, learning from scrolls and books looted from the libraries of their victims. They also learned of different deities, including Rovagok, a god that spoke to the destructive and savage nature of the orcs. He became their most worshipped deity, and in return, he gave his new clerics access to divine spells. Armed with arcane and divine magic, the brutal orcs seemed unstoppable as they conquered everything in their path, threatening the very existence of some surface-dwelling races. But the marching boots of the dwarves were still thundering towards the surface, and a century after the orcs stormed out from the Darklands, the stout folk followed. The dwarves thought they had destroyed the orcs and was angered to see their old foe not only alive, but ruling this new world the dwarves had been destined for. And so the dwarves built 10 mighty citadels, known as Sky Citadels. New battles began as the dwarves started to reclaim the surface for its original inhabitants and for themselves. For centuries the surface was stained with orc and dwarf blood, as the dwarves found the orcs much more resilient than they had been in the Darklands. But after 1,000 years of darkness, the veil of dust and ash lifts from Golarion, and the orcs see the horror that is the glaring light of the surface. Having lost the advantage of darkness, the orcs found it harder to subdue the human race and could themselves not live with the punishing light of the sun. The dwarves adapted much quicker to the light and found allies against the orcs wherever they went. Once again, the orcs were being destroyed by their ancient enemy, and their domination of the surface was at an end. They fled to the underground again, chased away by dwarves, humans, and the brilliance of the sun. The races they had ruled reclaimed much of the surface as the orc threat lessened. But the orcs would not become idle, and would continue to terrorize the surface, though this time mostly during the night. Some of the orc bastions on the surface still stood, and many of the orcs would force themselves into the bright light of the sun in an attempt to adapt their eyes. They somewhat succeeded, and though orcs are more vulnerable in the sun, they can bear the light now. While they remain a threat, they were, as orcs are, disorganized and as quick to battle amongst themselves as against dwarves and humans. But this all changed with the warlord Belkzen. Belkzen was as cunning as he was powerful, and he united the orc tribes under his Black Sun banner. He sought to reclaim the glory that the orcs had known and send the dwarves back down beneath the earth again. His mighty army laid siege to the dwarven sky citadel of Koldakar, crushing the dwarves' resistance at the Battle of Nine Stones and pouring into the defenseless city, slaughtering everyone within. Belkzen took the city as his own and renamed it to Urgir, which means first home in Orc. The dwarves tried to retake the city several times, but the orcs stood strong, and in the end, the dwarves proved unable to retake the lost citadel. Belkzen's army spread out across the region, pillaging, burning, and conquering the land, taking it for themselves. It quickly became known as the Hold of Belkzen, a kingdom dominated by orcs. In the years after, Belkzen ruled the orcs by fear and terror. To stop orc from killing orc, he ordered murderers to be executed and sacrificed to Rovokok, along with 10 from their tribe. And when an orc leader declared war on another tribe, Belkzen would disembowel that leader himself. This was of course unless Belkzen approved of the murder committed. These are known as the Laws of Belkzen. He survived countless assassination attempts and stayed in power until he died, or as many orcs believe, until he left the throne to single-handedly conquer the remaining sky citadels. His successors ruled by the laws of Belkzen, and those rules were followed as the years rolled by. Yet, with every generation, the kingdom of orcs grew more disorganized, and in the end, the Lord of Urgir ruled little more than the city itself, as the tribes outside the fallen citadel started warring with each other. While the Orc King of Belkzen is recognized as the strongest among chieftains and ruled unchallenged within Urgir, the orcs outside the city have reverted to the old ways. For more than 8,000 years, the Hold of Belkzen have been ruled by orcs, and despite the fact that the elves have returned, the sun rises by day, and humans and dwarves are as strong as ever, some orc warlords still dream of uniting the tribes and reclaiming the world for their own, as it was in the time where orcs ruled much of Avistan.